All right, welcome everybody. I'm Diane Conklin, and welcome to Queer Profits Podcast, where we stand for three things. We're about three things here: inclusion, community, and growth. And I am thrilled beyond belief to have my friend and business associate, Jack Kinley, with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about who knows what, some fun business stuff, some social things. And when Jack and I get together, you just never know what's going to happen. But hopefully you'll take some good information and some things that you can use from our time together. So Jack, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Jack Kinley. I'm CEO and founder of the Collabo group, and we've been in business for about 12 years, previously under a different name, but we've transitioned into our bigger role of HR consulting. And we've come into that over the years through different HR support services, but realized our broader purpose is really improving employee experiences for everyone and helping companies shape meaningful work experiences with an understanding that different employees come to the table with different ability, different background, different obstacles. And the old tried and true way of this is our company, we work one way, isn't working anymore. And there's some different ways to improve productivity, engagement for employees, and outcomes for corporations by really taking a deeper understanding of who the people are that work for you. And so that sort of helped us evolve from where we were as a communications consulting, HR consulting practitioner, into adding some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion services that we've recently added and expanded into.
And so is that what possessed sort of the rebranding and the new name?
Absolutely. And previously, the brand was a little more Jack than perhaps was serving us. The earlier brand was Lab Monkey Communications, very playful, grounded in my experience as a graphic designer, which is how I came into this whole HR practice. And really, Lab Monkey was a nickname for all the designers when we shared space and worked all hours of the night, coming up with new design ideas in school. And I wanted that playful, enterprising, fearless, problem-solving aspect of what I do at the center of the business. And I wanted something that really represented that, anchored in the business. But as we started to consider our future and who we were serving, the brand started to take a shift beyond me and my history and looking more towards the future of the work that we want to do and the people we want to serve. And I became hyper aware of the racial insensitivity and possible trigger of the word monkey, especially in the South, for its history as a racial epithet, and knew that even if I wanted to, I could not go forward with that name. And that was something I happily conceded because I think it was more important to get where I want to go than to hang on to the history and playfulness of something that could possibly hurt someone, get in my way, and just continue to damage people, even if it was unintentional and even was never part of the real history for me personally. Being aware of how things are perceived was really critical to the work that we do. And honestly, after 12 years of being in business, it was really exciting to let something go and watch something expand and bloom. And that's kind of where we are now.
So let's talk about that change piece, right? Because I think that's important, and I think that's a big piece of kind of one of the things I see with you as I watch. And you and I both live in the Metro Atlanta area, so I get the privilege of spending some time with you face to face on occasion. Is that you're I think really aware of and inside of your business as well as inside of your life, and right, we can't really separate the two, of kind of how things are changing. I think both in the business world and inside of our community, and being able to kind of take those two things and put them together and mesh them really well. So talk about that for a little bit, because I think that's an important piece that not everyone is able to do.
Yeah. Well, I think I might be, I don't know if I'm wired a little differently than most entrepreneurs. I don't think I am, but I certainly, I talk about it perhaps more than most business owners are. I think when we talk about our businesses, sometimes we we button up. And even, preparing for the podcast, I bombarded you with questions so that I would look perfect and sound perfect and smart. That's my business side. But at the core of that business, there's a human element, and I struggle to push that more into my business sometimes. But it is that self-awareness. My personal awareness drives this business 100%. And if I weren't aware enough of the world around me and my place in that world, I probably wouldn't have changed my business name. I would have continued, blindly forward in my unique experience as a cisgender white man, with a racial epithet possibility centered in my old name. But knowing that I wanted to move forward and change the world that I live in, and to use my business as a vehicle to do that, that self-awareness helped me shift that. And really that self-awareness comes from community, to your point about that. If I hadn't built a rich community around myself, I wouldn't be having the conversations that I have that push me outside of my comfort zone and make me aware of my own privilege and the things that I need to check and the places that I need to spend more time listening and advocating.
Jack, do you think, so I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about right? So when we talked about doing this and I invited you on and all that, it was that whole perfect. And I get it because I do the same thing. Do you think that part of that, do you think that's more the entrepreneur in us, or do you think that really has more to do with the fact that, you're a gay man, I'm a lesbian, do you think it has more to do with that? We'll use my word since we're called, since we're on the Queer Prophets podcast. Is it the queer piece of who we are, or is it the entrepreneur piece, or does it matter?
So I don't know. For me, it's funny. As I mentioned, I came into my business as a graphic designer, and really for me, I will say it is my history and legacy of being an artist and a kid who railed against math and science and finance and economics and all these things that I was taught were my path forward, like the way to meaningful, gratifying, important work. Right. That wasn't my path. My path was drawing pictures and making jokes and connecting people. And then secondarily came the business chops so that I could do this thing I'm great at. Because graphic design really for me is storytelling, and storytelling now is how I change the workforce and how I help people look at themselves and take accountability for changing the systems of their companies, and telling their own stories and listening to others. So in a roundabout way, like my perfectionism comes from I'm an artist and I'm scared that's not enough, and all the BS stories that people tell about artists are going to undermine my business success. So I better wear a button-down shirt and, a tie. No, that's just not my...
Fit into that traditional, whatever that means, right? The quote unquote traditional aspect of what it's supposed to mean to be in business.
Yeah.
And
I think it's my artist instincts that make this business successful. It's my ability to improvise and to be agile and to see what other minds may or may not see. And I built a team around me that's great at finance, it's great at contracts, it's great at all those things that I'm not necessarily, they aren't my superpower. I'm good at them. I know how to make sure they get done. I know they're a core element of protecting my business, stabilizing it, and growing it, but it's not what I'm great at. And if you put me in front of the client to start with contracts, you're just going to see the shade get pulled down and the light go out, and it's just going to be only about contracts. But if you put somebody else there beside me to run that with me, I get to be all this and personable and connect. And when contract negotiations start to get really hard and rigid, I get to crack a joke and elbow my way in there, remind everyone that we're all people and this is our goal. And this is really why we're actually signing the contract. Let's be people again. That's what I'm great at.
And I love so much that you get that piece, right? And I think so many entrepreneurs and so many business owners forget that, right? What is the thing that you're really good at? We try to be everything to all people instead of stay in that lane of this is what I'm good at. This is what I do. This is where I excel. And let me surround myself with, And people say, well, that's easy for you to say, Jack. It's easy for you to say, Diane. You've been in business for a while. You're successful. You've got the money to do that. But none of us started there, right? But having that, I think, just the awareness that, look, this isn't my forte, and staying in the lane of doing that. And I think it allows you, what I see is it allows you to be you, right? And that personable, funny, because look, every time I see you post something on Facebook, pretty much it makes me laugh. I mean, whether it's about the dog or husband or the business or whatever, I just always laugh. It's always that lightening piece, because we both have, and I think that's what one of the draws for us, for me anyway, to you, is that I have that sort of funny, fun, light side, and I have that serious sides too. So I relate, to that piece of where you come from. So good for you. Have there been times, Jack, when you think that, being a gay man has either helped or hindered you in your business?
I think let's unpack it a little bit, because I'm a gay white cisgender man, right? There's privilege, and then I'm gay. And so I think my experience is very different than a lot of others. And I'm also, I had a conversation recently with a friend who asked me if I'd always been masculine, and I cracked up, and then I was like, oh no, I'm being rude. This is a serious question, and that's my privilege. I had never examined that, and I don't even think of myself that way. I don't think of myself as feminine either, but this person that was having the conversation with me clearly thought of himself that way. And it has been a barrier to his success and progress and acceptance in the workforce. And so I've built a life, and I've made a beeline towards Atlanta, a very accepting community, where I could be 100% myself. And I had the rare experience of my first professional work experience being as an intern, having the boss, the manager of my department, out gay man. My manager direct above me, out gay man. My coworker, out gay man. 2 lesbians in the department as well, and everyone was out. And I mean, I was 22 years old, and that was the first professional work experience I had. And I had one since then where I wasn't out. And I left that job, probably, it was my first job after college. I left that one like maybe 6 months in, because I knew I had a better opportunity elsewhere, and that was here in Atlanta. And even when I've changed jobs since then, I've just started day one semi out. Certainly not in. I think the only job I had where I wondered if I had to come out, I just put a Jessica Simpson calendar up on the wall and a picture of my boyfriend on my desk, and let the context clues do it for me.
Right.
And that's the privilege of being in Atlanta. That's the privilege of being male, and even the privilege of being partnered. It's a little bit easier to navigate those conversations when there are more people at stake, and it's a little more heteronormative and traditional looking to be partnered. So I haven't experienced it as a barrier to my success and progress. I haven't experienced it as sort of a boom to my success. I don't know that I could see it any differently.
It
I
just
guess
is, right?
where it has contributed or held me back.
Yeah, and I love that, right? You're just Jack, right? Kind of like I'm just Diane. Do you ever get feedback inside of the community about like that piece? Oh, Jack, you don't get it because you're not ultra feminine, or because you are partnered, or because you like, do you get that feedback at all?
No, not really. I probably drive that feedback because I like to talk so much. um, I maybe don't get that feedback directly that, it's easier for you. Like, I don't get that comment. But I am aware that it is easier for me. Maybe I hear it's different for men. It's different for gay white men. And certainly it absolutely is. I think that, I hear it in that way. I don't hear it directly,
Right.
targeted like, an attack or anything like that.
And I think part of that is because you do have such the awareness, right? And you have that sort of soft kind of way about you. And I think like me, it's that, you know, the inclusion piece, right? I mean, you're all about you know, inclusion and not the separateness. So I
And I
love
think,
that.
sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm almost always going to be the first one to try to acknowledge the privilege that I'm aware of. Um, and I do that a lot. And I do it very publicly because I think it means so much more for me to say it than for someone with less privilege than me to say it. Um, because first of all, they got to be tired of saying it. And second, it sounds different coming from my mouth. In some ways, it's permission to people like me to look at their privilege. Um, but it's also, I mean, I think it's my role to understand my privilege and to speak out about it, um, because with that privilege comes less risk for if people don't like what I'm saying. So what? I've got so much privilege. You can take a little bit of it. That's fine. But there, you know, are women and people of color and trans people who have so much less privilege. You cannot take more from these people, and they shouldn't be the only voices advocating for themselves. So that's why I'm such a loudmouth. I think I wrote a piece recently about being a loudmouth Southern white man, and learning that from my loudmouth Southern male relatives, um, but not being afraid to use it for the people that matter and who don't have that platform. You know, there are times where I feel like, oh no, I'm just being another obnoxious, like angry white man. But if you're angry for good reasons and advocating for people besides yourself, I think that's way different than only being angry and advocating for yourself.
And I think it's partly the way you do it, right? Because you have that ability to add the humor and you have that softer way about you. Sometimes your anger, you know, your anger doesn't come across like, you know, I tend to be that, you know, straightforward in your face. Let me tell you how I feel. Whereas you have that softer way. And I think, look, kudos to you, right? I mean, that goes a lot farther than me trying to, you know, slammo jammo my way in, you know, it just does. And it's easier for people to accept and to take and to hear.
Yeah, I think I get it from my mom. Honestly, like she was the picture of grace and subtle leadership, subtle but firm leadership. And I get the angry loudness from my dad. So like you put those two together,
It's a
I'm
good
really lucky that I
combination.
had those role models.
Right, right. So Jack, tell us. I'm gonna do a couple things here. This is, you know, this is what I love about doing this. Is it we always end up as the conversation goes in different directions than I could ever have imagined. So, but I love it. I think it's perfect. Talk about just quickly because I want to make sure that we hit the inclusion, we got the community. Let's talk a little bit about growth. What's the one thing that you've done in your business maybe this year or that you plan to do next year that's given you the most significant growth?
It's Let me answer it from the long haul perspective. You know, the one thing, and I've just become so consistent and grounded in it that I do that helps the most is really is networking. I can sit here all day in the office doing the behind the scenes stuff that you have to do, but if people don't know I'm doing it, and if they don't know who I am, or we don't have that personal connection, that's how my business grows the most is by expanding my circles. So, you know, I was on the board of the current now called the Out Georgia Business Alliance. But I was on that board for 5 years, and that just, I can't tell you how exponentially my network grew during that time. Um, and the importance of that is that network, not only people I can call on for gigs and work and projects, but to learn how to solve problems in my business um, that all these other businesses have as well.
Sure.
And beyond that, it's just being self-employed, being the head of your business can be a very isolating and lonely experience.
Amen to that.
And I think that how I manage my energy and myself is probably the number one thing that grows my business. If I'm depleted and I'm worn out, I will not go to an event, even though I know guiltily that that is the event that you're supposed to be at. You're supposed to shake those 3 people's hands because they're the people you're trying to get a contract with. If I shake their hands and I have stank face because I'm exhausted and burnt out, then that's more damaging to the business than not shaking their hands and not showing up. So I'm in this constant battle with myself to make sure that I leave enough time for me to put the wind back in my sails and stay accountable to, I know that event's coming up. I know those 3 people are going to be there. What are all the distractions that are hitting me today and tomorrow and the first thing in the morning before that event that I can minimize so that I show up ready and refreshed and happy to be representing my business versus dragging myself and feeling obligated and beholden to this thing that I have to do. It's that constant dance of how do I stay in this space of doing the thing I want to do? Because at the end of the day, every day I have to remind myself, no matter how hard it was that day, this is my path. This is the one thing that I want to do most. So how do I make it great?
Yeah. Yeah, and I love it, right? Ultimately it's your choice, right? And the fact that you've got some self-care and that management piece, right? That self-management and that time management, which we think, so many people are like, "Ooh, time management, ooh, discipline. Oh, that's a bad word, right?"
Yeah.
But I think that's a big part of it. So let's talk as we wrap up. Jack, give me your number one business wisdom, either that you've ever received or for the listening audience.
I keep all these Post-its or note cards on my bulletin board over here to my right from when I worked in a mastermind group. And the one that I go to most often is, we used hashtags to take notes because we're goofy. It made it more fun. And you could boil big thoughts into little tiny sound bites that you can hold on to. But hashtag trust your Jackness is my number one business advice. And for me, it just translates to trust yourself. You got into this business because you're great at what you do and you're great at how you do it. And when you lean heavy and hard in that direction, that's when great stuff happens. And when I move over here to that perfectionist side and I think too hard about who I'm supposed to be and how everybody else is, I disconnect from what grounds me in my business and what draws people to me and what makes working with my company and my team a really rewarding experience. So I would say trust yourself and actually do a lot of work to get to know yourself and build your business around that. Like, you're the center of it. Make sure that you're taken care of and make sure that you've got a great team around you.
Yeah, that comparison game is always a losing game, isn't it?
Yeah.
We start comparing ourselves to, what we're supposed to be or, what everyone else is doing. It's always a lose in your, in your head. So what about social wisdom, Jack?
In the greater context of just the world around us,
yeah,
or your personal life, like, can you expand?
So what would you say, let's just go specific to the LGBT community. I mean, where do you think it's headed? Where do you think the biggest challenges are, the biggest changes are going to be happening? Where do you see that?
I mean, the first thing that really leaps to mind for me is, I've talked about it a lot, and where I am on my journey, and it may not be true for the whole community, but where I am on my journey, and I think where this country is on its journey, not to go too political, but I think we need to come back from this space of extreme fracturing and dissociation from each other, and remind ourselves of the things that unite us, the very simple human truths of dignity and self-respect and kindness. I think unity is a big overarching focus for me. I'm at a place where I'm looking back at the places I've contributed a lot of effort and asking myself if I need to continue putting effort there, or if there are other places and other communities where I can make a bigger difference by linking arms with my neighbors in different areas. So that's part of it. And for me, just the personal passion really is transgender inclusion. And I've been on that journey for a long time. And it just goes back to, I don't want to waste my privilege. Like, I was born this way with equal part privilege, equal part disadvantage, depending on how you look at it. And I don't want to live this life and squander my privilege and make it all about myself. I think the world is about those around us, about each other, and just about spreading good things.
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of my three big ones are unity, integration, and acceptance. That's kind of like the three in my sphere. So I love the unity piece. I think if we could all just unify, accept each other, and come together a little bit more and integrate, right? I mean, what is there left, you know? But we all want to fight for the thing that we believe in, which is great. And how do we do that in a way that is all encompassing, right? And I think that's one of the big challenges.
My husband challenges me frequently with the idea that it's not an either or scenario where some side loses. Life can be a and yes scenario.
Right.
I can care about myself, but I can care about so many other people as well simultaneously. And I think that really caring about others requires you to know when to check yourself and what's good enough, and what's just plain outright greed, and causes the continued suffering of people that need you to relent a little, give a little, and recognize that you're part of a larger community. Because really, I think when you do that, that and yes comes back to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a great way to wrap up. Jack, tell them, folks, a little bit, give them kind of your contact information if they're interested in getting in touch with you, how they do that, and we'll wrap up with that, because that was some good stuff.
Good. Thank you. I had a really good time. Learn more about my business at the collabogroup.com. That's TheCollabo group.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And we're, a little more fun on Insta, a little more business on LinkedIn, and a little hybrid of the two on Facebook. So pick your poison, follow us there, join the conversation. And thanks, Diane, for having me on.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it so very much. Hopefully you guys got some great stuff out of this. And I'm Diane Conklin. We'll see you next time on the Queer Prophets Podcast.